Hey everybody, thanks for joining us for the initial inauguration of the IT Leaders Group here in Phoenix. We're really excited that everybody could make it. We have some great speakers today and we're going to have some great topics. We're going to end up doing this once a quarter, so it's going to be a continual thing. We're continuing to build off. I think the next date we're looking at is February 25th. If just quick facilities aspect, if you go down the right outside out here, straight down and take a left, that's where the bathrooms are. Other than that, you need to have someone with a lanyard on, give you a kind of a walk around. Everybody will kind of check you in as part of the team here at Expedient. They're also kind of filtering anybody else left up. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off to Doug Thies. Doug is set up this group in multiple of our cities here where Expedient has a market, is an amazing individual and does a lot with a lot of different leaders in a lot of different communities. So, Doug Thies.
Thank you. As Sean mentioned, my name is Doug Thies. I'm Director of National Strategy for Expedient. I've been with them for 9 years now. Expedient hired me to do community outreach for them 9 years ago, which is very unusual for an IT services company, right? I mean, most of the point is to sell more stuff and make sure it's delivered appropriately. So it's been an interesting journey. I'm anxious to talk to you about what we do here at IT Leaders. And if you like what you see here, I would recommend that you spread the word to your coworkers or to the people that you know on the soccer field or at church who might be in the same space. Everybody needs some leadership help these days, I think, and that's what we're here to do. So who are we and why are we here? IT Leaders was founded for directors and managers in staff IT positions, people who have historically been promoted from excellent individual contributors to some level of incompetence as a leader. Now, many of you know that probably as the Peter Principle. We eventually get promoted to a position of incompetence no matter how high we climb. It's very common in engineering disciplines, and as I was talking to you over here, I think it's very common across most disciplines these days. HR will teach you how to fire someone. They will rarely teach you how to retain them or how to be the best leader that you can be. These leadership skills are usually people skills, right? They have nothing to do with technology. And there are just a lot of challenges when you move from a doer to a leader. You have to give up being the smartest person in the room, at least to some degree. And that may have been your identity for most of your career, so it's very difficult for some people to give that up. But it's important to your team. Your team may be more concerned with you being a good leader than you are. I would challenge you to be concerned with it, just as concerned as they are. This meeting is really focused on three things: networking, getting to know each other. Most IT leaders get up and they go to work and they get their work done and they head home and don't necessarily know other people in similar roles, except if they've worked at other locations or other organizations over time. So networking is one of the key components of this. Mentorship, finding mentors and being mentors, that's a program that we will likely get started here sometime next year. If you have interest in that, either being a mentor or finding mentees or being a mentee, it's all up to you. I think there's real value in that. I think it's been important for many people in their careers. And then hearing speakers talk about their leadership skills and how they've had success over time. We've got two great guest speakers today that we'll hear from them. As Sean mentioned, the bathrooms are outside and down the hall to the left, across the way. If you need to leave early or if you need to get out for some reason, you can just text Sean at this number right here. If you want to take a picture of that, if you have to leave early, just do that. Or grab one of the people who have a lanyard. Leslie's in the back here, and Jacob and Sean and David will be available as well. If you like what you see here and want to stay informed about future events, itleaders.org/Phoenix is what you want to pay attention to. If you go to that site, there is a mailing list that you can sign up for. So if you want to be notified via emails, we send about 4 emails per event. As Sean mentioned, the next one will be February 25th, so we'll keep you informed about what's going on with that. And we also do some more casual events once or twice a year in many of our markets, and we'll consider that as well. In addition, we talk about this event on LinkedIn, and there is a company page on LinkedIn that we use to refer to it called IT Leaders Phoenix. Very clever. And if you follow that group, that's another way to stay informed about what's going on. We often will post leadership articles on that page so that you can stay informed and maybe find some interesting content on leadership apart from these meetings. There's a LinkedIn group called IT Leaders Community. I'll talk about that in a second. And we also have a Twitter account called IT Leaders Community. We will be a lot more active on that in the coming year now that we've got so many locations where IT Leaders is held. So let's talk about the private LinkedIn group. There is a group called IT Leaders Community, and that is a nationwide group for people who are in similar roles to you. I moderate that group, and I and one of my local Indianapolis attendees moderate that group. You sign up for that, we'll approve you, and you can submit questions or articles or anything you want that might be useful to the broader community, directors and managers and VPs and CIOs, or you can ask questions, technical questions, which vendors do you like, which vendors do you dislike, hiring and retention practices, leadership questions, or if you're looking for your next opportunity or have an open opportunity in the marketplace, you can also post in this. Again, if you like what you see here today, take a couple of pictures of the speakers or of the group and post on your LinkedIn if you're a loudmouth on social media. Do that. It's good. It's an easy way to get the word out about this event, and it will grow the event. Just to give you a sense, we had about 60 people sign up today, and we've got about 25 people here in the room right now. So there's always a drop-off. Anytime you have a free event, there's a drop-off. But the more people who know about it, the more people who attend, and I think that benefits all of us, especially when it comes to getting to know each other and maybe finding your next opportunity or trying to fill an open position. Sean, here's Sean's phone number again. Don't write it on any walls, but if you have pictures that you would like Sean to post, please send them on to him as well, and that's Sean's email address. Sean is the area VP here locally. He and Jacob Figueroa, who is the young man who will be coming in a minute, will be moving forward with this group. I'll be back in February, but beyond that, Jacob and Sean will be running this event and recruiting speakers and finding people. By the way, if you know speakers in your organization or other good IT leader speakers or leadership speakers, please let us know. We'd like to have them and share their information and their talents with the group broadly. A couple of things that are outside of market but that may be useful to you. We are starting an IT leadership boot camp, a pay to participate Leadership 101 class. It actually starts in just a few days in Indianapolis. It's a virtual event, but the trainers who are running it are actually in the Indianapolis marketplace, but anybody can sign up for it. It's $1,250, and it is a DISC assessment. Everybody familiar with DISC, or anyone familiar with DISC? It's kind of a personality assessment on how you're wired. A 360 assessment, so a way for you to get feedback from your direct reports and your upline and your peers on what sort of a person or a leader that you are. Not everybody wants to hear about that, but I think it's useful. And then 3 sessions on a variety of topics, including emotional intelligence, tabletop exercises, things like dealing with difficult people, and a couple of other topics. So if that is of interest to you, if you can't grab this session, I would encourage you to maybe put it in your budget for next year, especially if you've got new leaders, if you have direct reports who are new leaders, or maybe if you've got leaders who aren't particularly self-aware, who could use a little bit of feedback from the outside looking in. It can be very useful. We like to cross-promote. In all of our markets for IT leaders, we like to cross-promote other events that are happening in the area that might be useful. Do any of you attend other events that exist here at Indy? Go ahead.
So,
I'm sorry, Phoenix. I said
yeah, Chris Alejandro. Some of you may know an organization called SIM, Society of Information Managers. There's a local chapter here. They have monthly dinners, events, activities. But this year is kind of special. I think in November they have the national chapter is having their annual conference here at the Scottsdale Princess. SIMS is information for IT leaders, all different levels and what have you. Long story short, it's a great organization. There is pay to join it. It's really low cost, $300, what have you. But lots of great events, high level, IT leaders, cybersecurity leaders, risk, the whole nine yards there. Great information, great thought conversations, great presenters. So SIM is one of the organizations, plus ISACA, ISSA, all those other ones. I belong to all three chapters here as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead.
So, SIMS is a great one. ISACA, IC Square, IC2 now they changed their name, right?
Yeah.
But I'll also say InfraGard. Anybody know what InfraGard is? Yes.
InfraGard is a security organization, right?
It's the FBI's private partnership for securing our critical infrastructure.
Yes.
So if you're in IT, that's one of the critical infrastructure. I'm the co-sector chief for IT in Arizona. Our annual meeting is the 17th of this month here in Scottsdale.
Can folks who are interested talk to each one of you directly if they have interest?
You don't have to be a member of InfraGard to come to the annual meeting.
Great, fabulous. Who else? Anyone else with other meetings? I would encourage you to try some of these meetings, and if there's others, please come back with the information so we can share. And we're hoping they'll share our information as well with their groups. We're focused on leadership, remember, and we're focused on directors and managers, but VPs and CIOs are always welcome to attend these meetings. All right, this is your part of the meeting as well. Do any of you have open positions in your organization that you're looking to fill? It's a great way to crowdsource those open roles and talk about those specifically. Anyone? All right. Okay, it's kind of a weird year for that sort of thing. Go ahead.
Careful with staffing companies.
Okay, you're with a staffing company? Okay, and what's the name of that?
Talent groups, locally Progilisis.
Okay, Progilisis. Okay, great. Yeah, that's helpful. It's an election year, so our hiring's always a little weird in an election year. Hopefully, after November 5th, things will clear up and we'll be back to normal when it comes to hiring and filling roles. Anybody looking for their next position here in the marketplace who wants to say it out loud?
Retired. I'm looking for retirement.
You're looking for retirement? I don't know if I can help you with that. I think your boss needs to help you with that. Okay, all right, sounds great. If you are interested in a role, the LinkedIn private group is another way to voice these opinions about open positions, or you're looking for your next one. So please join that if you'd like to. We have 8 years worth of content under our belts for this. We started recording these events about 4 years ago during COVID. Remember that? Remember COVID? And we have continued to record those, and this meeting, along with many of the other meetings in the past few years, are available online. If you go to Expedient's YouTube channel, that's where the videos are located. Ashley here is recording us today for this first meeting, and we will continue to record those. We also take the audio out of these events and publish them on a podcast called, oddly enough, IT Leaders. So you can grab these if you are a listener, if you like to listen to that sort of stuff on your drive. It's perfect for that. And the 2 talks that you hear today will be published in both venues as well. Great. Just to give you a sense of what some of the content looks like in some of our other markets, there's an upcoming meeting in October in Louisville, minimizing barriers to effective communication. That's a DevSecOps person from Humana Health. She's really something, and you wouldn't necessarily think about the security professionals being the experts on human communication, but she's really amazing. So that should be a good one. And then Glenn Keller, a speaker from Indianapolis, who's done a couple of different presentations over time. He's going to be talking about your technology and how it can destroy your productivity if you're not careful. So there's some leadership issues along with that too. He's a great speaker. That should be a good one. And then the next Indy, we're going to be talking, Mike Gill will be talking about leaving a CIO role to be an entrepreneur. He was a CIO for many years in Indianapolis, and he has switched off to be an entrepreneur. Rachel Clark, who's the CIO of the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, you know, is the most loved or the most hated role in a state. She's really amazing too, and we're actually working together to arrive at her talk in November. We don't have a title for that yet, but we will have it shortly. That content will be on the YouTube channel and also on the podcasts once those events happen. Next IT Leaders Phoenix event is February 25th, very likely in the same room. By the way, thank you for coming today. We're working out the kinks, and obviously this is a computer room that we're in, an empty computer room. It's one of our expansion spaces. It's a little echoey in here, as you probably noticed, and it's a little cold too, so you'll probably remember to bring your jacket the next time when you come. We weren't sure how many people would show up, so we decided to use the bigger room here, but we are excited. We've got a couple of speakers that we're confirming here this week, so we'll announce who those speakers are shortly. Please invite your friends and your coworkers to that event. Remember, itleaders.org/Phoenix. This QR code that's up on screen is actually the registration for that upcoming event, if you want to grab that. So finally, gratitude from me to our employer, Expedient. Expedient lets me and has let me for the last 8 years spend their money and my time putting together these events. Expedient believes that leadership is one of the most fundamental IT strategies that there is. There are a lot of IT strategies. There's cloud, there's software development, there's governance. There's a lot of different approaches to making your IT team the best that they can be. I think leadership may be one of the most important ones. If you're going to say top two, I'd say it's probably the first one. So the willingness of Expedient to invest in the communities that we exist in, and some of the communities where we don't have a data center, is pretty incredible. We do a lot of different things. We do co-location, as you can probably imagine, as we own this data center. We are also one of the nation's largest VMware clouds, and that's gotten super interesting because of the Broadcom acquisition of VMware. And we do a number of other services like disaster recovery, AI gateways, and edge solutions as well. So if those are of interest to you, our team would be happy to talk to you about those. Finally, today's speakers, we're getting around to the good guys, the good speakers. Brady Howe is going to kick us off. He's the Director of Sports Medicine at Grand Canyon University. He's going to be talking about human potential and leadership and how we can maximize those. Steve Reese of the Phoenix Suns is going to be speaking to us as well about full court leadership. I sense a sports metaphor there. The power and the strategy behind that. So if you will allow me to get the power, I'll be the AV guy here for a minute and get the PowerPoint switched. We're going to kick off with Brady. Thank you.
Good morning. This is exciting for me. So Steve and I actually met. I've been here now in the Valley for 7 years, and I moved here, and I've moved around quite a bit for sports as well. I just finished my 7th season with the Phoenix Suns, so this is a new title for me, new venture. A little bit of a leap of faith. There's a number of reasons for that. One, pro sports is definitely not meant to be a lifelong career. It's what you would expect. It's a lot of travel. But at GCU, it gave me a little bit of freedom to stay here in a place that my wife and my 10-year-old little girl have found home. And so I'm excited, but I just wanted to let you know that that's kind of how we were connected. I'm also really quickly, I'm excited to speak here because what this opportunity provides me is what leadership kind of is. It's a challenge, it's uncomfortable, you know, so to sit here and say that I would ever be speaking to a group of leaders is not something that I would ever have even been thought I would be labeled as a leader. But part of my story, just so you know, I'm an athletic trainer. So physical therapy, I was an aspiring athlete, as you can look and see, like I had really no right playing sports. I'm undersized, you know, I would just label it underskilled, but I had a lot of grit. I grew up in a military household, and my parents were phenomenal resources for me. So I played college football, and again, that was probably the last sport that I should have played, and I've worked with some of the biggest, most athletic athletes in the world whose parents didn't let them play football, and I joke with them, well, what does that say about my mom? You know, I was tackling guys your size, and I've got a bunch of surgeries and scars to prove it, but I went the route of athletics. My father was a very mechanical guy. He can build houses, fix cars. Some of my uncles and best friends are in the IT world, and I just knew that wasn't my expertise. So, but I am excited, like Doug said, I get a lot out of these opportunities because it's networking, it's learning something new. But with part of my story, just so you know, is it started in athletic training. I wanted to stay in sports. I wanted to help athletes overcome the challenges I experienced. Getting cut from a team, the psychological warfare there, getting injured, being isolated, psychological warfare. Eventually, being the undersized athlete, why I tell that story is because I had to live in the weight room. I had to find out how to find some resolve, how to come back. I had to figure out how to build on my weaknesses, but also lean on my strengths. So for me to be able to tackle a 300-pound dude when I'm 155 pounds, I needed to learn how to find some grit in the weight room. And because of that, I also became a strength and conditioning coach, which is what brought me to Phoenix my first year, as I was brought here after a stint with the Utah Jazz, the Atlanta Hawks, and to Phoenix to be the head strength coach. After 1 year, this is where Steve and I met. After 1 year in that position, my first year at the Suns as a strength coach, we were the youngest NBA team in the league. The average was 19 to 20 years old, so literally just shy of a high school team. We also, ironically, won only 19 games that year. We're absolutely atrocious. After that, we had a big shift, and I think there was about only a dozen of us who remained in employment because they were just ready to start something completely fresh and new. At that time, I didn't know it was going to completely change my life. I went from being literally a lower level, on the ground foot soldier, I would call it, just doing the work. That's what I knew. And just so you know, the athletic trainer, the strength coach, we're not supposed to be up here in the spotlight speaking. We're not supposed to be known who we are. We're not supposed to be getting any credit. We're supposed to be behind the lines helping these athletes get all of that credit. It's not about us. So I'll always be the first to say the strength coaches, the athletic trainers, even the coaches who claim that they had any part in that victory are lying. They're fueling their own ego. So I say that because this is for me, it's exciting, it's uncomfortable, but it's also good reps for me to meet new people, meet new ventures, and put myself out there a little bit. So the final caveat here you'll see in psychology. So just this week, I finished a second master's degree in psychology. I decided of all the things that I've done and experienced in 15 years in the NBA, the biggest blind spot I had was the mental game. And that doesn't just apply to athletes, but obviously the elite athletes kind of know how to work through that, how to overcome these things, because I'm sure as stressful as all of our jobs may be, the pressures we put on ourselves to improve, to show out for our boss, for our teammates, those, unfortunately, I say unfortunately, because in sports, your life is on the table for everybody to see. Your failures, your successes, and when you do have an injury, when you do perform poorly, it's for the world to basically critique you, to go at you. So I'm now kind of jumping and taking a leap of faith rather than living more in the physical realm of injuries, of strength and conditioning, which I love, and there's a lot that you can and I can bring to the table for each of you and show how that will lead to performance even in your world. It is the mind, it is the psychology of how we actually drive those decisions. And so I've found a passion in actually leading athletes, leading coaches, teams, organizations, cultures that is more strategy and the psychological aspect. And so, again, I never thought I would be up here talking to leaders. I'm happy to share a little bit more of my story about how I got thrown into that. But once that first year as a strength coach ended and I got put into it was a vice president role, I literally became one of the youngest vice presidents in NBA history. So from never really being in a leadership role to doing it at the highest level with responsibilities that I had of a $115 million salary cap of injuries and performance, it was a big pill to swallow. And I don't know how many of you have children, I don't know how many of you have bought your first house, but this is one of those opportunities that you're never prepared for. And I'm sure, I don't know how many of you can relate to that in a leadership role, but you're never ready for it. So I say, life is a performance. You are all performers. So I've seen performers, but you are all performers. And leadership is just a people business. No matter what you do, no matter how many people you interact with or are responsible for supervising, leadership is a non-stop moving target. And so that's why I like to get into some of these conversations, because it's really engaging for me to see how people overcome some of these challenges and obstacles that you face on a daily basis. Now for me, this is an interesting one. From my experience, this diagram might be the most important model for conscious leadership. And some of you are going to look at that and, you are probably used to seeing a lot more detailed diagrams than I am. But how simple is that? Now I want to take a poll real quick before I explain what this is. But leadership, you are either, as a conscious leader, either operating above the line or below it. So just a quick, poll, raise of hands. How many of you believe today, as a leader of your groups, are operating above the line? Good. Here's the good news, is at any point in time, you can either be operating above or below the line. Again, when I say it's a moving target, that's really a moving target. But the choices you make, the day-to-day operations, you're either inching your way above that line or below it. Now, conscious leaders operate above that line. Below the line are the unconscious leaders. Now again, you could be 80% of the time a conscious leader, but there's oftentimes how many opportunities, experiences, challenges do you find yourself operating below the line? Okay? So, of course, those of you who answered yes, I love it, but also I'm sure that you've experienced opportunities where you kind of fell below the line. Okay? And we'll get into that a little bit further. But those that operate above the line in any given situation, and hopefully the majority of the time, you're open-minded, you're open to opportunities, you're curious, you're explorers, you're creative, you're committed to learning, you're committed to leading your group. Now again, these leadership positions, I'm sure many of you have been on the foot soldier, as I call them, that was my experience, just the doers. You just do the work. Leave me alone, let me do my job, I'll go home, everybody's happy. Now it's a little different where you're, what I experienced, like being the assembly line manager. You're responsible for the people being the doers, and that's a little uneasy, because there's only so much we can control and so much influence we can impart. Below the line, I call the unconscious leaders, a little bit more closed off, defensive. As I operate, or say, committed, that got messed up a little bit, but committed to being right, you're playing not to lose. Does that make sense? So instead of playing to win, you're a little bit more defensive. Now, I will get into some of the things that I see with this that are the somatic responses, the physiological and physical responses. So those below the line, as you can imagine, if you're closed off, you're defensive, you're trying to prove to others, including your boss, that you're right, that you're doing the right thing. You kind of start to tiptoe and operate in a way that starts to fuel your ego rather than fuel your teams. So look at this and kind of ask yourself, have any of you guys experienced being above the line being below the line. I'm sure you have examples, experiences that are resonating. You probably have examples that you can feel your bosses are doing this. This is the fun part, is you probably have experiences where your boss is doing certain things and they're doing their best given the circumstances they have. But you have a perspective, you have a thought process, you have a critique. Again, the social media people who are basically speaking on the NBA players, it's very similar to say, well, my boss should have done this, he should have done that, she should have done this. One of the biggest lessons I can tell you that I learned as being a leader was, just a quick story, when I got thrown into that. Ironically, that first year where I was here as the youngest vice president in NBA history, responsible with all these big costs associated, stressors, here's COVID. So not only have I never done this before, I'm doing it at the highest level where it's basically graded on wins and losses on television, broadcasted with millions of dollars at risk, and here's COVID. Something that nobody knows about, nobody knows how to operate, and I become the Grim Reaper because now I have to go around day to day force feeding COVID tests to about 70 people on the travel party. Players eventually got pissed off at me, head coaches wanted to cut my head off. How fun is that? I'm a leader, you know? So those you're gonna find yourself in sticky situations. This thing really got cut off. But we'll make it through. Here above the line, the parasympathetic. So I just want to give you a little bit of some connections here. I'm sure you guys are all very intelligent people. I don't know how many of you guys have gone and taken anatomy classes, know about psychology and all the various things that come with it. But I just want to give you guys some practical examples of everything that I've experienced and learned, both in the physical realm of helping people work through injuries, to now an area I'm passionate about, which is the psychological aspect of how they bridge. Okay? So again, I like to use this line because those that are above it, you think of our ancestors, hunter-gatherers, we still know to this day that we are hardwired and our brains have not changed or evolved much in thousands and thousands of years. So those who used to work in tribes, who used to work together to go hunt and gather, it didn't matter. Your brain was wired to have an alarm system. That alarm system was to trigger when you heard a sound, when something was a predator in the background. Those exact same responses are what you guys experience every day. It's just been elevated and heightened thanks to the technology that you guys are all so masterful at understanding. These technologies lead to parasympathetic or sympathetic responses. So your brains are no different than what our ancestors were when they were hunter-gatherers and a saber-tooth tiger was chasing you. But now that same stress response that you may be feeling because there's a deadline, because your boss just yelled at you, you just have a breakup, your kid's going through something, this is very similar responses that you have. This is a chemical cocktail that gets stirred up almost every day. So for those of you who operate above the line, who again are very open-minded, who are committed to learning, this is the rest and digest part of your nervous system. This is what keeps you calm. This is what keeps you organized. Elevated confidence happens. These are the people who are more often process-oriented. You see a lot more creativity, collaboration, innovation, all the things that we strive for. The good news is that even though you're hardwired here, you do have choices where you can make step-by-step approaches or inch your way towards to more often than not being above the line. Now those of you who naturally feel like, well, I want to be above the line, but I can't help it, I'm naturally more so below the line. You may be a brand new leader of your group. You may be like myself and you have had these experiences you're not prepared for. And you don't have time to figure it out. You don't have time to be in a group of other leaders to lean on each other, to ask questions or advice. You're just in it. So that was my experience, and there were obviously some wins and losses that I can chalk up, but probably more losses. The good news is that we tend to learn more from our failures than we do our successes. Do you all agree? Yes. Those of you that may experience this, again, the fight, flight, or freeze, this is a natural thing. There's nothing wrong with you. This is natural. This has been going on, again, for thousands of years with our ancestors. So those stressors, whether it be a saber-toothed tiger or it be a deadline, you're going to have certain autonomic responses. You may be somebody who gets very defensive, again, below the line. You may be somebody who lashes out, again, below the line. These things aren't wrong, but we're going to get to understanding is that you need to create an awareness of what is going on. So that fight, flight, or freeze, this sympathetic nervous system for those that are below, leads to a little bit more arrogance, maybe some ignorance. You may want to just completely avoid a tough situation altogether, rather than elevating your confidence. Now, you got to decide which one you want to feed. Okay, it's kind of like a story of two wolves. Okay, which wolf kind of tends to win or live is the one you feed the most. So you have choices here. If you operate a little bit more here, that's still okay. You have things that you can do to get up here. It's a day-to-day process. Like I said, it's a constant moving target. But when you are down here, you experience hyperarousal. Now, how many of you have experienced what I mean hyperarousal, elevated heart rate, your breath shortens, all these various things? I mean, it's rhetorical. We've all experienced it, right? You get shakes, you get a little sweaty. I mean, I kind of felt it a little bit before I spoke to you guys. This is natural. But that's also why I enjoy doing this, because these are challenges that I look at with an open mind to overcome and to live through, rather than to avoid it, to run, fight, flight, or freeze. But another key thing here that leads to is, are you focused on outcomes or the process? And this is where I've seen the most elite athletes, coaches, and brightest minds in sports navigate through. Are you based in principles that are process-oriented, that will undoubtedly lead to outcomes, or are you focused predominantly on the outcome? Now, whether that's maybe your boss is putting pressure on you to get something done, of course, you know you need to get it done, but is there a process? Because all these things feed one another. If you're an outcome-oriented person, these things kind of get elevated. Your arrogance, your ignorance, you get hyper-arousal, whatever that could be. Some of you may have to literally be on medications just because it is hard to navigate these things. You're fueling your ego. Fear gets elevated. Now this one, I was just talking to Doug about, there's a really good book that I can share if any of you guys want to ask after, but instead of FOMO, you guys don't hear of FOMO, fear of missing out. Here you have the fear of other people's opinions. You're leaning on what my boss thinks, what my wife thinks, and of course these things matter. I'm not saying they don't matter, but you have to start by being a little, this is where I'm okay being selfish, being a little selfish so that you can elevate your confidence rather than fueling your ego and leaning to arrogance. So I kind of like to lean on this little, I guess, equation, if you will, which again, I should have been equal sign, but I'm just killing it with my slides that I put together quickly last night. Starting with self-awareness. Everything should start with self-awareness. Self-awareness should lead to self-regulation, action steps, approaches that you take. Self-efficacy should be the reward. Okay? So self-awareness, the ability to observe, listen, and examine yourself so that you may understand who you are, how you naturally operate, and how to be the best person that you can interact with in your environments, whatever that may be. Maybe sports on the court, where everybody's watching, maybe in a data area just like this. Now, self-regulation is the ability to direct attention, modulate emotions, think before acting. You can, of course, lead to self-regulation, decisions, things that you can do without being aware, but you're blindly doing so. So some of us operate that way. That is kind of below the line. You're just sleepwalking. You're naturally in a hyper-arousal state. You're doing some of these things that just lead to just being a zombie. It all should start with self-awareness. Now, this is I think the most important thing that any of you guys can do, truly, is just understand where you're at and be truthful to yourself. Am I in a hyper-arousal state every day? Am I on medications because I can't control my heart rate, my blood pressure? And thankfully, because I've worked with those who are in the physical realm, they acknowledge how important it is to take care of themselves physically. But I was always focused on the physical aspect, and I kind of had a blind spot of thinking about how our mind game leads one versus the other. Now, I'm never going to be able to tell you that the mind fuels the body and the body fuels the mind, because they coexist and there's so many different overlapping contextual environments that help understand these things. But I will say, if you start with self-awareness of truly being honest and transparent with yourself of where you're living, either above or below that line, even right now, you go into your work, your jobs today, You have choices. Am I going to operate in this situation above or below the line? Am I going to be open or closed? Am I going to be defensive? I mean, these are things where you have to ask yourself or tell yourself, where am I right now? Am I operating above or below the line? At the end of the day, you want to get to self-efficacy, which is your belief system. This is the confidence that you get fueling. This is an individual's belief in their capacity to act in a way necessary to reach specific goals. We all have goals, we all have deadlines, we all have ambitions, but self-awareness plus self-regulation is going to lead to self-efficacy. Now, a few more slides here because I wanted to keep this very simple because I can just riff and go. Action steps. Again, I've kind of touched a little bit on the power of choice. That's the self-awareness piece. Just stop and ask yourself, where am I right now? If you have a heart rate that's pounding, if you're short of breath, if you're shaking, if you're nervous, let's say you're a leader and one of your coworkers comes up and just completely rips you a new one because you're being a terrible boss. Understand and accept that one of the hardest things, and I still deal with this today, is if you're overseeing a group, a task, and it's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, you can't please everybody. You never will. You're not going to be the picture-perfect boss for 10 out of 10 employees. I think at best in my position with the Suns or even GCU, out of 10, I might be moderately good for 6 of them. But I'm self-aware that I'm trying to work on what can I do to support the other 4. I'm not going to be perfect, but I want to get the best out of them. So as leaders now, the hard part is shifting and putting on a different hat to where now you're not just on the ground floor being the doer, you have to help others do. And I think you know that, but the power of choice you have is just being able to look at yourself and look at your circumstances of where you're at and have that self-awareness. Now, the self-regulation piece, the action steps that you can take that can help, okay? Doug talked about it, gratitude. Some of the biggest things that I've seen from empirical research and evidence is just waking up with gratitude, literally being happy with what you have, your position, your team, your opportunities that you have. Now, if you're not a journal person, that's fine. I completely now have gone through this route where I would have laughed at this a few years ago, but realizing what I know now, there's power in it. It's getting it out of you. This is another reason why I like to come and speak to groups like this, because it's coming out of me. An hour ago, I probably would have laughed that I can actually see some of these things naturally come out of me, but through journaling, because it's writing, it's coming out of you. There's power in realizing, if it's done through gratitude, that it can lead you to making those choices that operate above the line. The next thing, because I know many of you may operate, right? You're not on the basketball court, you're not on the football field, you're not out in the sun. You're probably in buildings like this where, let's be honest, you guys aren't getting a lot of vitamin C, you're not out and about, you're not being physically active or paid to play. When you find yourself maybe in a situation or just throughout the day where you're below the line, you're just stuck in something, I like the standing desks. I like to make sure that everybody knows that they can just go and take a 10-minute walk. But even if you're so dialed in or you're in a meeting or you're about to give a presentation, stop and just breathe. How many of you guys have heard of box breathing? Anybody? So there are so many different forms going back to kind of Buddhists and monks and things that are,
What was the term?
box breathing. So this is the simplest one I can give you. But if you ever feel like you are in a hyper-arousal state, the one thing that we can anchor ourselves to is our breath work. And that is one of the most uncomfortable things that people, when they hear the word meditation, mindfulness, it really all starts with your breath work. So you can just call it breathing, because you can't live without breathing. But also many of you and many of us, our bodies have morphed and shaped. I mean, when we look at some of the quote-unquote like the caveman statures with bigger noses, bigger jawlines, our bodies have evolved for hundreds of thousands of years because of how we're breathing. And a lot of it is because of the modern day society of technology and the things that we stress ourselves out about. I also laugh when some people are going and getting plastic surgery to make themselves look a certain way because they're also just altering their breath work. But a box breathing technique, if you're in a hyperarousal state, a stressful situation, we'll do it as simple as this. Let's have you put one hand on your chest and do this together, one on your belly. And honestly, just give yourself a moment. Just breathe normally and try to recognize, are you breathing more through your chest or are you breathing more through your abdomen, your lower belly? Okay? And there's not a wrong way to do this, but there are responses that happen whether you're naturally a belly breather or you're a chest breather. A lot of people don't know how to breathe naturally through their nose, out their mouth. A lot of us wake up and our throats are dry and our mouths are just open because we're mouth breathers. Okay, this is why we've had a lot of companies now come up with like tape so that you're taping your mouth shut when you sleep. Box breathing is as simple as this. It's just 4 by 4 by 4 by 4. So let's actually start here. I'll just give you a practical exercise. And again, if you find yourself in a situation that's stressful, you're at work, nobody even needs to know. You don't have to do this, but this is just helpful to see how you're breathing. Take some time to breathe, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to inhale for a 4-second count through your nose. Ready? Here we go. Through our nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now hold that breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now exhale through your mouth. Blow it out. 4, 3, 2, 1. And then hold again for 4, 3, 2, 1. It's as simple as that. You're inhaling through the nose as much as you can. Now, I also would just tell you, because you can do this later, but the chest or the abdomen, I like to alternate. For 4 seconds, I'm breathing intentionally through my chest. I'm making my hand on my chest elevate. Then I get it out. The next round, I do it through my belly. You're going to realize there are so many various ways that you can breathe that's going to benefit you. The response from this literally is paramount. If you're stressed out, and if you just did a workout, if you went and got on a Peloton or a treadmill and your heart is pounding, 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 and you stopped even after you're sweating and you're just breathing, and you literally tried to do that box breathing, you're going to feel your heart rate just instantly drop. It's incredible that most people aren't integrating this on a daily basis. So I like to tell people, even my athletes, when you start your day with gratitude, and you start your day off with 5 minutes of breathing. Instantly, your power of choice is going to start above that line. Does everybody understand that? Any questions? The last thing is just movement. Again, in this situation, just go for a walk. If you're able to, if your boss supports it, if you can't just breathe sitting there working on a project, if you're able to get outside, if hopefully some of you or many of you are here in Arizona where you can just go outside and you got sun. That would be an amazing thing. But go for a walk, because movement is medicine. I've dealt with people in the physical therapy clinic. I've been in surgical centers. I've been on the court. Movement is medicine. You got to keep moving, okay? Now, I'll finish it up here pretty quickly. For those of you who are leaders, principles are the concrete we stake our claim in. So you have to realize what you value. Okay, if some of you are fresh to being a leader, just like I was, and at the worst possible time, it's hard to figure out what do I stand for, because you're trying to scramble, you're trying to figure it out, you've been thrown into the pool, you don't know how to swim, you feel like you're drowning, okay? My suggestion, what I've learned firsthand, is lean on process instead of outcomes. The outcomes will come, okay? Obviously, we love goals. Be as diligent as you can with goal setting and reverse engineer, okay? Do the best with what you got. But lean on process instead of outcomes. The next is quality over quantity. It's crazy to believe that doing less better, more consistently, leads to more. The basics are the new advantage. These are your competitive edge. Again, simplify. Now that may be easy to just say, and some of the fields that you work in, it's probably not easy to simplify, but sometimes we make things a little more complicated than we need to make them, okay? All of these is what I love, the exact principles also ironically fit within the physical world that I operate in strength and conditioning. We can only produce what we absorb, meaning let's be flexible, let's be adaptable. Bend, don't break, okay? It's kind of interesting to say concrete, and I'm asking you to also be able to absorb. But as leaders, realize that moving target, that complex puzzle that you're trying to solve every day, just be open, okay? Be above the line and realize that you're going to have some stuff that your teammates come to you, and you've got to be willing to absorb it and help them work through it. Functional integration versus segregation, okay? And here, for me, this was always, here is the strength and conditioning group, here is the physical therapist, here's the sport coach. You would think that they're all on the same team, solving the same problems, working towards the same goals, wanting the same outcomes. We want to win a championship. You would be amazed to know that there's not a single team that I believe, including the New England Patriots, the Boston Celtics, none of them are all on the same page, because now it's grown so big and it's such a big business that nobody is communicating effectively, nobody's on the same page, and everybody's at war with each other. It's truly amazing. Like, there's not a single team that I'm willing to stake my life savings that they're on the same page. Of course, there's going to be one winner, but a lot of times that comes down to a whole lot of luck than it does actually building a cohesive team, a culture. So I say that because do what you can to make sure that you are integrated as a group, okay? Because I know depending on the department you work in, everybody's operating in their little bubble, thinks that they're doing well, they're doing it right, my boss is wrong, my teammates annoying me, all the various things that you tell yourself, right? But you as the leader have to figure out, how do we make this integral? How do we integrate everything together? Because this is easy, but that's what kills. That's a culture killer right there. And then this is probably the biggest thing. I wish I could speak on this exclusively, but communication, I mean, we're working in a people business no matter what you do. This is a human condition. We're working with humans. Humans experience a lot. But you as a human being, you have to start with yourself. What's your self-awareness? What can you do today to operate above the line? And if you do that, you're probably going to be able to communicate a little bit more effectively, openly, and that's going to bleed out, and it's going to be very infectious to your teammates. And the last thing is just optimistic adaptability. This is something that I've leaned on the last year. Changing the plan should be a part of the plan. We are constantly changing. If I were to say that I'm the human being right now and 5 years ago, right now, if I was to say that I'm going to be this same person for the rest of my life, I've reached all my benchmarks. I literally have accomplished all of my professional goals and more being in that role. And then I realized that it meant everything to me until it didn't. There's always something we're changing, evolving, growing into. There's always stressors. So realize being optimistic through gratitude, through some of these actionable steps of mindfulness, meditation, movement, breath work, it leads to being optimistic more often than not, which leads to being adaptable. Okay, bend, don't break, all these various things. Now, kind of in just a number of slides, threw a lot at you, but I kind of just want to open it up to the group because I want to give you so much that I have learned and experienced, but it's hard to do that in one presentation. So I kind of leave it there, and I also just want to open up the floor. What kind of questions do we have? Thoughts do we have? Because I love to learn from others and what you guys experience as much as I've learned firsthand from my own. So I'll kind of open it up to the group for any questions.
I don't know if it's a question necessarily, but I'm curious. One of the challenges I've got with people first is that as their managers, that we know the circumstances they're in because of confidentiality. Obviously, we don't share those with other people. And then I think that's been one of the biggest stressors for me is trying to help other people have some compassion and understanding without divulging, obviously, why. But building that type of communication has been one of the more beneficial ones that I've been able to do, but it's also very challenging because we kind of sit in a unique spot in these roles that we've got.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing of not knowing this space that well, because as far as the HIPAA, confidentiality, and the few realms that I've operated in as well, it is hard to be able to say just enough, but not leave people out to dry, right? So oftentimes what your coworkers are going to look for is acceptance. At the end of the day, everybody wants to be accepted, they want to be loved, and that's not just in their personal lives at home with their parents and significant others, it's actually in this setting. So if you're a leader or you're just a teammate that's responsible for integrating other teammates, sometimes it's just a one-off. Like just having conversations with them goes a long way. I've found that as a leader who's overseeing, let's say a dozen people at a time, and there's only 7 days a week, I mean, my goal was to try to sit down with one of them every day, even if there was nothing to talk about. Because that goes a long way when they realize that you're actually interested in me, you're investing in me. And so figuring out what your communication style is definitely a skill set that you learn along the way. And so, but I acknowledge you for that, because that's a tough one. It's a tough one, and every day you're going to run into new things, right? So when you realize, I didn't put it on here, but I kind of have a diagram that I like it's more within basketball, professional basketball, but it kind of looks like a clock, like all the dials that kind of connect perfectly to make a watch work. In basketball, it's the same thing, whether it's the physical therapy department, strength coach, the sports psychologist, the dietitians, coaches, general managers, everything. And I put the player at the center, and I realized that there are so many moving pieces and so many people pulling at them that when a player walks in, I mean, they're stressed out in themselves just to be able to perform in practice, because everybody's doing that. Now, we experience that too. If you're the leader in this situation, like you come in, you have 10 teammates that are operating underneath your leadership, they're probably all jockeying for your attention, your approval, your blessings. So my biggest suggestion is just trying to find out how can you spend a little bit of time with each of them throughout the week. And then when you have your staff meetings or whatever you guys set up, how can you make sure everybody feels like they have some stake and ownership and equity in it so that they feel involved? Some of those situations I like to do too, where I'll just put people on the spot and say, hey, you're king for a day, what would you do? And give people, just having a voice sometimes goes a long way.
That's really good. Brady, thank you very much.
Of course.
But it's a pleasure to be here. So here's going to be the agenda for today. Let's talk a little bit about my background, who's up here talking to you, where have I been, where have I come from. Then I'm going to show you a picture of my dog, but also you're going to be a little bit of my confessional, and that I will confess how real life fell in on me at the Phoenix Suns, and how we had to recalibrate and really take a lot of the suggestions that Brady had to heart and begin to reformulate our leadership team on how we led and how we operated. Let's then go into personal survival skills. So as a result of some of this trauma that we were facing at work, what happened is that we ended up scratching everything we had as an IT department. We had to establish how do we live, how do we lead, how do we operate, and then with that we came up with certain survival skills that we have now instituted as part of our leadership group. And then next, let's talk about addictive leadership. There's a really good story I have in here about Jeff Fisher, a leader who, if he were here today and he said, Steve, leave the Suns, come with me, I'm running a dump truck, you're going to help me empty garbage, I probably would go. This guy had leadership that was addictive, and it went beyond just trying to tell people what to do and how to operate. This guy had my back, and then I'm going to bring also a historical perspective of somebody who I would love to do a poll later and find out if anybody has heard of this person. My opinion, probably one of the most admired people in Gettysburg, and when he led his troops that had an incredible impact that most of us don't even know about. So with that, let's fire in here to my journey. So this is my career journey right here. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I was the youngest of 4 brothers, so I was a lucky recipient of getting beat up by 3 older brothers nonstop. Grew up in a poor section of Detroit, Greenfield and 7 Mile. If any of you have been familiar with that, it's not a great section of town. Mother was a Cuban immigrant. My father was really right out of hillbilly elegy. He grew up in Mars Hill, North Carolina, joined the Marines. And so what it ended up being is a home that was filled with a lot of domestic violence. And so at a very young age, ever since I can remember, we had all sorts of things that were going on in the household. And so my mettle was being tested all the time over the fact of how do I deal with what's going on. And so it was really me and my 3 older brothers who had to bond together to try to figure out how do we handle the stress of what was going on. We didn't have any role models. We just had to kind of figure it out. And that's like a lot of us, right? We've just had to kind of figure it out on our own. And so what we've done is part of what's occurred in and with our IT team here is I wanted to bring some of those lessons to light so we could all kind of together figure it out, but what we wanted to do is apply science to that. So I escaped the People's Republic of Michigan, back in 1980, and so went to University of Houston where I graduated, hired in with Arthur Anderson. I don't even know if any of you are old enough to remember Arthur Anderson, but it was a public accounting firm. From there, I was in the Houston office, got transferred to Detroit, got transferred back from Detroit to Houston, where I began to work with the Houston Oilers. They had had a complete IT meltdown as a result that back in those days they didn't really have IT folks. They just had somebody who inserted tape, did backups. She kind of forgot to do it for about a year or so. The ticketing system went down. We lost all of our customer data. And on top of that, the Cleveland Browns had 2 IT folks, and this was the beginning of the war of data in sports. They had 2 IT folks who had figured out that every time they blitzed Warren Moon, our quarterback, he turned left. So at the time that I was then hired in May of 90, I was the 6th or 7th IT person in professional sports in the world, and all of those were in the NFL, and there was one who just retired, a guy named Charles Gore, who retired with the Atlanta Hawks. So I'm the last survivor of the 7. Okay, so from there, helped to relocate the team to Nashville, became the Titans. And then after a while, we went to Super Bowl 34. I felt like I'd accomplished everything I wanted to there. There was a buddy of mine who was starting an automotive franchise that was only located in the Houston area called Christian Brothers Automotive. They're all over the place now. So he said, hey, we want to learn what's going on with this. So I went from basically from the glamour of the NFL to the grease of doing tire changes and changing oil and doing engine repairs. So we started a franchise in Brentwood, Tennessee, if anybody knows where that's at, just south of Nashville. And we started the franchise there. That's where I really learned what being scared was about. We were losing close to anywhere between $9,000 and $15,000 a week for our first year. And then I decided I'm going to do some radio advertising. I decided to quit listening to this buddy of mine who started it. And I was going to begin to follow my intuition, more left brain, right brain. I switched to the right brain, followed my intuition, began to do advertising. And at that point, the day we're supposed to launch advertising is when 9/11 hit. And so lucky me, we had the day 9/11 hit, we lost $32 on an oil change and a couple of tire things, and that was all we had that day. Eventually pulled our way out of losing our shorts. I had my last $10,000 I dumped into that advertising. And then thankfully, by the first of the year, we were beginning to make $5,000, $10,000 a week, and we moved. And then after 7 years, thank God, we paid off a 15-year loan in 7 years. So it's all to say, I really don't know if I'd ever do that again. Then I left from there, wanted to get back into sports, hired in with the Houston Astros as their director of IT. Did that for seven years or so, met my wife there, wonderful gal. Actually, I met her originally when I was with the Oilers. She was my account rep from Digital Equipment, sold me Vaxes and that kind of thing. And then went to San Diego Padres as the vice president of IT, was there for 2 years. They were going through an ownership change, and at that point they had paused all IT projects for the foreseeable future, so I felt a little bit uneasy living in San Diego and having nothing to do. So then the Suns were looking to renovate their arena and do a lot of building and whatnot. They had a lot of problems, which is really great for me. Let's come in and fix them. Thus, that leads me to where I'm at today. Okay. Oh, I was clicking the right one. Okay. So, Brady and I, we live and work in the land of Oz. So, for those of you who remember The Wizard of Oz, this is that final scene where what you have is you end up having Dorothy and the crew finally meet the wizard, but then they discover it's some little bald-headed guy behind the scenes who's cranking the lightning and he's making the sound and all the stuff is going on. That's really our world. So as a quick behind the scenes, when the quarterback headset system was being tested back in 1991, Cleveland and the Oilers were the two that were beginning to work with that. Cleveland had an issue because their taxi cab dispatch system in the city would interfere with the quarterback headset system. So in the middle of giving the quarterback what the play ought to be, then there was some taxi delivery person that they're going to be picking up an old lady on 1st and Main, and that got blended in. We ended up trying a system with Warren Moon that had a little level in the shoulder pads. And so I remember when the guy came to tell me that this is how this works, and what it was is he sits Warren Moon down and he sits me down and he goes, okay, so here's how this system works. We don't want you to talk for about 30 seconds back and forth to the head coach, and they also had microphones in the headphones of the players, of the linemen. And so what you're gonna do is when you get under center and you bend down, the little level is gonna go dink, and it's gonna cut off the microphone system, and isn't this brilliant? And I saw Warren Moon have this silly little look on his face, and I was like, dude, this is not gonna work. And the engineer was like, yes, this is gonna work, and this is how it works, blah, 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 blah. And he continued on. And so then all of a sudden I see Warren Moon, he looks at me and he winks. We get to the very first play of the game, and he begins to walk under center, and what does he do? He puts his foot back and he goes under center like this, so he can continue to give audibles and instruction to all the linemen. During that entire game, I'm standing next to the engineer, who begins to throw his keyboard down, and he walks away and he's disgusted, right? So this is the stuff that occurs behind the scenes that many of you don't see. And in some respects, it's kind of the exciting piece that we get to see that the public doesn't get to see. If you go to the Football Hall of Fame, they have 3 versions later of what the communication headset is, but I really know the difference, so one day I'm gonna have to go there and kind of correct the record, and here's what we do. And then finally, there's also a Steve Reese rule in place. So Greg Williams, who was later the head coach for the Buffalo Bills, who was our defensive coordinator at the Oilers and the Titans, and later went on to the defensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints. Him and I had devised a system my first year there for game analysis, where we started doing predictive game analysis, where based on the formation, zone, part of the field that people were in, we could begin to predict what the offense was going to run or what defense was going to get played, and we could make decisions, coaching decisions on the field interactively with that. NFL caught on to that after about 4 games, and so then that's how all the computers got banned, thanks to me, from being in the booth. So if those were burning questions you have in your mind, there we go. So off to the confessional. Okay, this is my dog Houston. That's why she's in the picture. About 9 months ago, kind of the temperature within our IT department was building. Our attitudes were getting short with each other, how we supervised everybody else. We were not leading by example. Many of the things that Brady talked about living above and below the line, I would say we were below the line. We were focusing on outcomes. We weren't focusing on the process. We were trying to get to A to B. We didn't care what the human toll was. We just wanted to arrive at that spot. There was just not great stuff going on. If you look back, like a lot of us, we had been through 4 years of really difficult time. We first had COVID. And just as COVID went off, we decided to embark on an arena renovation. So as everybody else was home, the IT department was all at the arena, like the day that the NBA shut down on, what was it, March 20th? Or somewhere there. On the 21st, I was in the arena. There was a wrecking ball smashing the concrete in the middle of the floor, and off we went. We built a new player facility at that point. These guys are gone to Florida, so they're off on their own. And there was a part of us that really missed that, because here it is that we're working for a professional sports team. We're not able to watch the game. We don't have the camaraderie. The family is split up. I've got people within my department whose spouses work in the medical field. They're having to come home every day. They're stripping in the garage. They're decontaminating. I mean, so you kind of get the idea. This went on for us, and then we go through an NBA investigation because of certain things that were going on within the organization. Then we go through an ownership change, and then after that, we go through another arena renovation, which we're continuing to go through to this day. We build a new headquarters. So we had been through a lot of trauma, and we had just developed a lot of really bad habits. That was a good tune right there. I like that. So we had developed a lot of really bad habits. So as part of that, what we had to do is I stopped everything in April of this last year and said, we're going to wipe the slate, and as leaders, there's 6 of us, we're going to get together and we're going to outline what our leadership principles are. We're going to figure out how we're going to act differently, and we're going to put a lot of other pieces in here, or what I'm going to call really survival techniques, personal survival techniques. Oh, here we go. Let's go to that one. There we go. In order to help us handle this. Now, Brady talked about some of the ones I'm going to talk about. I'm going to bring in the science behind what we've done. And here's part of the science. Is the science tells us that at any point in time, 70% of us are either headed into a crisis, we're in the midst of a crisis, or we're coming out of a crisis. It doesn't have to be a huge crisis. It could be, at AJ, he's got 2 young daughters who are growing, got issues going on there. We have, you know, somebody who may be going through a divorce. We've got a dog that's sick. I'm taking care of a mother and taking care of a father. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that kind of comes in on life, and it's amazing to me that the number is as low as 70%, because it seems to me that most of us are pretty psychotic, and that it's not that only 10% of us are on the right track, but 70% of us are going in and out. So what I wanted to be able to do is to really go through science-based methods that we could look at and figure out how is it that we can incorporate these things such as gratitude, and let's go to that right now. And let's figure out how can we incorporate stuff such as gratitude in order to allow us to be better leaders. Because at the end of the day, it's a little bit like Meet the Fockers, right? How do we self-soothe? We've all been in the dumpster at periods of time, and you know, you just can't get out. And I go through these periods. I had a period of this like back in July. I had some medical issues that came up, and I'm trying to figure out how do I get myself out of the dumpster? How do I perform above the line for my team members? So here's a glass of water. The story behind that glass of water is, being the youngest of four, my brothers beat up on me all the time. Like, that was just part of the thing. And what I learned is kind of the like the terrorist attack, where I would hit them in the head with a shoe and run, and like that was my approach, but they would find me and kind of pound on me and do whatever they would do. What would happen is, when my parents were home and they would beat me up, I'd begin to cry, then they would begin to kind of somewhat waterboard me and make me drink water. And so the theory behind drinking water is, and try it, next time you want to cry, drink water and you won't be able to cry. Like, that's the reality of it. And so what you have with gratefulness is, when you're grateful, what it does, it crowds out fear and anger. And so as a kid growing up in a home with a lot of domestic violence, what happened is the coping mechanisms that I learned and how I got along was through anger. Anger was kind of the friend. It was how I powered through. But as an adult, what I learned is, when you supervise people, you're motivating people, you're married to a spouse, anger and bitterness are like really, really bad friends. And so what I had to learn is, how do I drink that water in order to stop anger and fear from pouring into my life? So here's the science that is behind it, and there's some studies here, and I can provide you with that. But what happens is, the science bears out, and I've done a bunch of research on this, and what I wanted to do with our IT team is let them know, when you're in a bad spot, if Aaron's in a bad spot, or AJ or Anthony or different people are in a bad spot, sometimes you just have to stop, drop, and roll and be a little grateful about something. Now, as part of the tragedy of growing up in the home that I did, I had a 30-day period where both my stepfather and my brother committed suicide, in a 30-day period. I had friends tell me that I didn't smile for a year. Like, and David knows me, I'm kind of a smiley, laughy sort of guy. So what I had to figure out through that is, I began to live almost minute by minute of just little things of gratitude, like, oh man, the water tastes good. I'm wearing some Air Jordans, or whatever the case may be. And I had to learn to be grateful for small things, almost minute by minute, and it began to pull me out. But the science really goes to show you that when you are grateful, it crowds out fear and anger, it increases teamwork, and it lifts everybody's mood. And so with all of that being said, you think gratefulness is just kind of like, let's be grateful, let's be happy. But what we've done in our group is, let's just pretend that you're in a staff meeting and I compliment you. I say, wow, that's a great shirt that you're wearing today. And man, you know what? I'm gonna have to really work on my dress code because of what you're wearing. In the past, during our staff meetings, somebody would say, nah, man, that's all right, man. I love your Air Jordans, I love your shirt. But we don't allow that anymore. What we do is, we have to have somebody, when we compliment them, to say, thank you, I received that, right? And so not only is it good to be grateful for yourself, but it's also good to just accept the compliment and say, thank you. Because for myself, like, I deflect compliments all the time, and I'm kind of like, oh man, And so that's one of the things that we've instituted. Let's go to the next one. Random acts of kindness. Okay, we're going to talk about pancakes first, and then we're going to talk about the clock. So, we had an incident at my home where there was a fight between my parents. Ended up being, mother was handcuffed in the banister, going down the stairs. We had a very small 2-bedroom duplex, and so it was a very crowded house. My father had handcuffed her there, blood all over the wall. You kind of get the idea, right? It was a very, very messy scene. And so at the end of all this, I remember my father saying, we're getting ready for school the next morning. He says, okay, just walk past your mother and just act like you don't see anything. And just think of the absurdity of this thing. So we walk downstairs, we leave, we go to school. The very next day, my brother Jim says, hey, I want you to get 5 of your best friends, and we knew who they were, Billy, Michael, James, Vince. Let's get them all. We're gonna go to the International House of Pancakes. We're gonna go to their all-there-can-eat special. Jim was a junior in high school, worked at a popcorn factory, which I never recommend a popcorn factory, especially if you're making the caramel corn, because he had burns all over his arms. And he goes, I'm gonna take you guys there, we're gonna go eat. So we walk up the street, we go there to their all-there-can-eat special. We started at 8 in the morning. They kicked us out at 2 in the afternoon, so it's not an all-you-can-eat special. There is a limit on what they have. They kicked us out. So I was sitting there figuring, man, this is just like the oddest thing. And so I'm like, you know, we're walking back from there, and I'm like, man, so like, why did you do this? And he said, because what I had to do is to offset the bad with something good, something good. So now we speed forward to 2015, and I'm in a bad place, right? I'm in a bad place at work. I'm just, you know, things aren't going great. And so all of a sudden, I'm sitting in our TV room at home. We have a little sports room, and I've got a football wall for my football life, and I got a baseball wall and a basketball wall, and we're sitting there. But this clock is sitting there, and this belongs to William Wesley Cheeseman. It's a great uncle of my father-in-law. And so I started recounting the pancake story, and he's like, man, let's just start doing random acts of kindness at work. Let's just figure this out. So what I did is, under the assumed name of Willie Wesley Cheeseman, I started writing cards to people at work, one a month. I included a $100 gift card in there. And so one was like the painter. And I wrote to this guy, and we did the assumed pen name, Willie Wesley Cheeseman, and I wrote, you are the Picasso of our building. Every day I walk out, I see where people have carelessly scratched walls, they've bumped equipment into stuff, but the next morning I come in and they're gone. You set the mood for all of us when we come to work. Take this $100 gift card, take a coworker out to eat, and know that you're being celebrated. And I put that there, and I did the first one. I was like, damn, that just felt really good. Nobody at work knew. I had different family members write the card every month, so they couldn't match up the handwriting. And do any of you see like the Pets on Parade show? It's the Humane Society show that's on Saturday. Well, there's a gal named Kelsey Dickerson who is one of the hosts there. So she received a card. She was an intern. She had much more potential than what they were giving her. And so I wrote, you know, what a great job she did. What I started finding is, over the course of the 10 months, people started pinning these cards to their module and really looking at the fact of what Willie Wesley Cheeseman, WWC, we like had the name changed up all over the place, and they were trying to figure out who in the hell is doing this. And so it became this game where I went around and started, you know, like taking on this new persona. And so every week we'd get together with my father-in-law, like who's going to be the next target. We'd all vote on it as a family, and then off we'd go. Here's the science. Right there. So you can see some of the effects. The thing that I've noticed is what we've done with our IT team is there is a packet of cards you can get, and it is for random acts of kindness. And they're like a little scratch-off card. And so what we do is once a week, a leader picks a card at random, and they either have to do what's on the card, they scratch it off, and then, or he can do a replacement task, and we all have to vote on it. Do we accept this task or not? One was to give a $100 tip at a restaurant. One was to pass out biscuits to dogs as you're walking, you know, if you're at a shopping center. Another one was to take grocery carts, wrangle them up, and then push them in place. So then when the grocery cart guy comes out to push all the carts in, he's like, what the hell? All the carts are in place. Like, this is a surprise. So, and what we're finding is all these little bitty ways of showing gratefulness and gratitude in these random acts are really beginning to kind of heal people from the inside out, right? And so, and the thing that I've noticed is really the being more jovial. What I'm finding is now people are more jovial. They're coming to work with just a little bit of a higher sense of pride and just a little bit more happiness, because I think what it does is it takes the focus off of yourself and it puts it on somebody else, and that's gratifying. And the science backs all of it up. Okay, sleep. I brought some notes up here because there's this one piece I want to read, and I need to get Brady's feedback on this. So, sleep. So this was back in about the same time. This would have been back in 15-16 with Aaron Nelson. So he was our head athletic trainer at the time. He was the predecessor to Brady. So what happens is he calls me up and he says, hey, we've just got a bunch of fat players coming into work. Like, what's going on? Like, I've got players who are 10, 15, 20 pounds overweight. What's happening? He goes, so what I need to do is to be able to fix sleep and fix fat. Those were his exact words. And so is there a correlation? Can we find tech that allows us to kind of look at this? So what him and I did at the time, I was sleeping probably close to 4.5, 5 hours a night. He was sleeping 4 hours a night. I would say in the field, it's probably pretty standard, right? To be sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night. So what we did is we went on this journey to figure out how do we sleep better, how do we restore better, and began to find out how really important this is. So these are kind of the numbers. What we began to find out is we were trying different things. I worked with the VA to find out what do they do for shock therapy. I used sensory deprivation tanks. I went to a hypnotist. If you want a good hypnotist, her name is Elvira Paxton. Taught me how to self-hypnotize so I could fall asleep faster. Like, there were tons of methods that we began to look at. But here are the hazards that we looked at is that when you are sleeping 6 or fewer hours a night, that's being chronically sleep deprived. And I would say half America is 50% is 7 or fewer hours a night. So America right now, the USA, is very underslept. Your testosterone levels will drop to somebody who is 10 years older than what you are. I turned 64 in a couple of days. That puts me at 74 or 80, sleeping at that level. The risk of cancer jumps by 70%. The number of calories, when I began to sleep, as we went through this program over 9 months, my sleep changed from 4.5 to 5 hours a night to over 7.5 hours a night. And I will tell you, it's a process. It didn't flip overnight, but I lost 30 pounds doing absolutely nothing but sleeping, which is insane. And so Aaron began to lose weight. And what mostly happened is that I met Aaron and his wife at one of our team stores, and they're in there, I don't know, buying something, and his wife comes up and gives me a big hug, and she goes, oh my God, he was like the most horrible person, and now I like him a little bit better, he's sleeping more. So, and my wife kind of attests to the same thing. If she were here, she'd be nodding her head going, yeah, he's a nicer person. So sleep and what you do as leaders is really, really important. And I think not only is it important for you, but also to monitor, because there's, like, I'm not sure how many of you pull an overnight conversion, but like those things are going on all the time. And so with all being said, what we had to do is begin to monitor the sleep of our leaders first, put the mask on you before you can assist somebody else, and then we began to put the mask on everybody else and assist them on how they could sleep better. So here's a study that was based on Andre Iguodala, who played with the Golden State Warriors. They did a sleep study with him. Got to rattle these off. Whenever he would get more than 8 hours of sleep, he had a 12% increase in minutes played, 29% increase in points per minute, 2% increase in three-point percentage, which is astronomical, 9% increase in free throw percentage, and a 30% increase in motor skill learning, okay? So you look at the bottom two there, and this is more on your emotional, your strong emotion increase and emotional breaking. When you're getting 6 or fewer hours sleep a night, your amygdala, your fight or flight center, is 60% more reactive. Steve Reese does not need to be 60% more hyper than I am in fight or flight, but it hires at 60%. Your ability to apply the brakes and not be a complete jackass is reduced by 70%. So if you want to change culture, and you throw gratefulness out, you throw random acts of kindness out, sleep, I would vote, is the number one right there. You want to change culture? And so what we did based on this study is we ran 2 sleep boot camps at work, where we had a total of close to 80 people that signed up for these boot camps. We brought in a neurologist, sleep scientist, and we kind of walked them through how can they sleep better, what do we do. We've got a really weird schedule at the arena between the event staff that's there late at night for a concert and then a game, and then there's nothing. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. But if you want to change the culture within your department, you want to just change the culture within your home or among your friends, I would just say sleep. Sleep is like the easiest one, okay? Okay. One interesting thing in the Iguodala study, and this is the other one, is that when he slept less than 8 hours, he had a 37% increase in turnovers and a 45% increase in fouls committed. Like, tell me that his amygdala wasn't firing off when he got less sleep, and that's why, and his prefrontal cortex wasn't stopping him from getting in a fight with somebody else. Interesting. So what happens on the court is just a reflection of what we do in real life. Okay? Okay. Final thing that I've done with our team is I'm demanding that they form a personal board of directors. Don't know about you, but I've got about 5 people on my personal board of directors who I call based on certain situations. If I've got kid problems, grandkid problems, marital problems, issues at work, IT problems. And so what I've done as part of it is part of my leadership team is I'm really pushing them to make sure that they've got 5 advisors. They don't have to tell me who they are. And none of my advisors know they're part of my board. They're just part of my board. They don't know this. One of them is a guy named Bill Schlau, who's at the San Francisco Giants. I think he would resign from my board if he knew he was on my board. But there's a number of people that are on my board who don't know it. But what I would say is just make sure, as far as you as leaders and as far as the people who you're managing, I would say having a really good peer network that you can go ahead and bounce ideas off and just have some affirmation with is a wonderful idea. Okay, let's talk about addictive leadership. So addictive leadership, in my opinion, is the leaders who I've run into are the ones who really help me to feel internally, to feel their leadership. I feel they've got my back. I want to learn more. I want to fight more. So let's give you 2 examples of what this looks like. So has anybody heard of, and I think I spelled Gettysburg wrong. I noticed that late last night. Sorry, I sent the slides off already. Has anybody heard of Joshua Chamberlain? Okay, 1, 2, there we go. 3, there we go, great. So Joshua Chamberlain was the colonel who was over the 20th Maine on the far right flank at Gettysburg. And it was a little place called Little Round Top. And so if you look from Little Round Top, there is a ridge, there's a wall that runs about 100, it's like a brick wall that runs like 150 yards to the right. And as you look down, there is almost a 100-yard decline going off this mountain, and that's where the 15th and 47th Maine gathered as part of this battle on July 2nd. The battle had started really July 1st. July 2nd was the very next day. And if you kind of figure this to just set the table, there are close to about 170,000 men who are there to fight. 70,000 on the Confederate side, the rest are on the Union side, and they're flanked all the way from there all the way down to Gettysburg itself, and they've been fighting a day. The casualties within that battle were close to 50,000 people over the course of those 3 days. And so you can imagine that Joshua's group, the 20th Maine, is hearing the battle raging. They're anticipating the fact that this is going to be them. And what they were told was to hold that left flank at all cost. If the Confederates at the 15th and 47th Maine had breached that left flank, they would then have the high ground. They would then have the high ground, be able to attack the Union from behind. And many historians have kind of countered that had Joshua not held that left flank on that particular day, that we would probably have, the Union would have most likely lost the Civil War, lost that battle, and most likely the war would have ended that summer. And right now, what we see as the United States would most likely end up being probably 9 to 13 independent different countries like Europe. And that's going to have a huge impact later if you kind of think about the action of this one guy, because when World War II broke out, the U.S. had enough resources and people and money to fight a world war on 2 fronts between the Pacific and in Europe itself with Hitler and Hirohito, okay? But on this particular day, this is what Joshua thought of himself. What he was is when he joined a couple years earlier, he was a professor of rhetoric. He was basically a speech and an English teacher at Bowdoin College. I don't know if any of you have been to Bowdoin College, but it's like this little bitty small school where the tuition is outrageous. I think it's like $120,000 a year. And it's a small little place. And so he joined because, in his words, he was bored. But when he sat there on the left flank of Little Round Top, this is his opinion right there, is that he really didn't know anything about warfare. He was just a stubborn guy, and he had within him the inability to do nothing. I think that's a double negative. It was like, damn it, I'm going to do something. Like, this is my time, and I'm not going to let this happen. So what happened is within that period, and here's a picture of Little Round Top right here. This is the side looking down. And you can see down there, so you're about 100 yards down, and now this is the piece looking up. So that's a hike going up and down Little Round Top. And so at 2:35 in the afternoon, when the sun was going to be set more to the west and looking into the eyes of the Union soldiers, that's when the 15th and 47th Alabama decided they were going to do their first rush. Up the hill, they had close to 800 men, and they just hoofed it up that hill while 300 men from the 20th Maine are shooting down. And so this went for a first full charge. And if you can kind of think, the battle continues to rage over to the right of him. And there's, at that point, already 2 generals and 2 colonels who have already gotten killed. And so this went on for 1 charge, it went on for 2 charges, and just kind of imagine that every time a charge takes place, the rebel yell is going out. So they're screaming, they go 3 charges, they go 4 charges. In the 4th charge, Joshua Chamberlain is shot in the belt buckle. It knocks him down miraculously, is not wounded. They continue to fight, and now in that 4th charge, there's hand-to-hand combat that's occurring at the top of the hill. They somehow push the 47th and the 15th Maine back down the hill, and now they prepare for a 5th charge. At that point, the Confederate troops had been reduced to 400 men, and at that point, Chamberlain's crew was reduced to 80 men. So kind of figure that now you've got this battlefield where you've got these sweaty people all over the place, there's dead bodies all over the place, and Chamberlain is sitting there thinking, what in the hell do we do? Do we just give this up and we just run? What do we do? And many of his men were trying to convince him that we need to just leave and let's just get the hell out of here and save ourselves. And so at that point, Joshua became a little bit unresponsive. And so he wasn't talking to people. The bugle boy is up in the thing. He says they're preparing again. Joshua gives a command to fix bayonets. And then what he does is give the silliest command in all of military history, to execute a great right wheel, which that's not a military command, and nobody knew what the hell he was talking about. But from that ridge, he jumped down, he fixed bayonet, he put his sword in his hand, he gives a command that nobody understands, he begins to charge down the hill. And everybody else looks at him and they said, well, we have no idea what he means. I think he means charge. So on this 5th charge, they met the 47th and the 15th, they met to the middle. But because of how fast they were charging and because Chamberlain is just screaming, and what he really felt is Chamberlain's attitude was this, and that was he felt, I knew that I may die, but I knew that I wouldn't die with a bullet in my back. Like, I am all in, I'm pushing the chips in, this is how I'm gonna die, this is the end of it. But everybody else followed him, which is crazy. What was it about his leadership that caused 79 other people, and they only had 160 bullets among the 80 of them? That's all they had. They had 2 rounds of ammunition, 2 bullets per person as they charged down that hill. And the 15th and the 47th Alabama, as he's charging down that hill, were so shocked by how fast they came down, they surrendered. There were 400 people, 300 people that surrendered to 80 men, and there was one story of a single private with a single round in his rifle guarding the number of people in this room holding them prisoner. And what would cause somebody to do that? Like, that is called addictive leadership, because what it is, at the end of the day, what they understood is they didn't understand his words. A lot of your folks are maybe going to get confusing commands. They may not totally understand what you're saying, but what they're going to understand is your actions. They're going to understand the kind of person you are. They're going to understand, like, do you care for them at the end of the day? Like, do you have their back? Do you care for them as a person, not just an employee? Now, let me give you a personal example. Let's talk about Jeff Fisher. Okay, so there we go. There was the day, September 26th. So the week before, my soon-to-be wife we were running a project. It was a DECnet conversion. It was a Novell network. Thank you. Meshing with a digital VAX network. Don't recommend this. And what happened, there are 15 conditions that have to be met in order for everything to go to hell. And that day it did, on Monday, which was the 20th. And so this was basically an order from our owner. You got to charge forward with this. We're in the middle of the season. By Monday afternoon, we had lost every bit of data in our entire system. Counting system was shit. Our football game analysis system was down. We were playing Cincinnati Bengals that next week, Icky Woods. Everything was totally down. It's the one and only time that I have melted our entire corporate network and nobody could do a thing. We sent everybody home on Tuesday. They didn't show back up until the following Monday. It was dead. Ironically, during that project, there was a gal who was part of the project. She, I don't know, somehow decided that she came out as a witch that day. I don't know why that was just so crazy, like we have this and then that happened, like all these crazy things were going on. So what happened is then the following Monday, Jeff Fisher comes up, first coach that would talk to me because the coaches were so mad, like they wouldn't even talk to me. And so he comes in Monday, comes in our computer room, and so he begins to walk toward me, and I'm like, Coach, man, I am so sorry, can I explain? And Jeff's like, no. He says, man, I'm an IT executive, I know about this stuff, and he's kind of joking with me and taps me on the chest, and he goes, Steve, here's the thing that I know. When you walked in last Monday, you didn't have the idea I'm gonna totally screw the network. Like, that's not who you are. Like, you came in with the best intentions, you made 3 backups, everything's got restored, we're back. All I ask is that if you're doing anything crazy this week, we're playing Pittsburgh, can you just kind of hold off until after Sunday? Let us play Pittsburgh, we need to win this game, which ironically we lost, we beat Cincinnati. That's how we're gonna be. He gets ready to leave the room, and I go to shake his hand, he knocks my hand out of the way, and he gives me this big hug. And he refuses to let me go for what felt like 30 seconds. And I swear to God, he was trying to make me cry. And so he wanted to let me know it wasn't about the disaster that occurred. He wanted to let me know it was about slapping me in the ass and getting me back in the saddle and getting me moving again, right? Now, let me tell you, that right there is what I consider, let me go back to this other slide, what I consider addictive leadership. Because at the end of the day, what he inspired me to do is that if my mother had come in that room and Jeff would have said, take her out, sorry, Mom, you're gone. But I think with what all of you do, it's about bringing your best self. And whether you get there through gratefulness or random acts of kindness or better sleep, there's a lot of people that rely on you. And that you've got to be your best self before they can be. And Jeff in that moment for me was his best self in order that I could be the best person that I am. So anyway, with all that being said, know that you've got so much sympathy and compassion from me with what all of you have to do, because it's not an easy job. I mean, it's a tough one. And somebody's got to be the adult in the room, and somebody's got to care. And you know, for a lot of these kids that work for me, many of them come from dysfunctional homes, and they don't even get that right parenting from their parents. And so in some respects, we're kind of who that is. So my, encouragement to you is be that Jeff Fisher guy in many respects, hug your people every day, and just let them know you care for them, you love them. Because like I said before, Jeff walks in this door, I'll tell you what, I seriously would move heaven and earth for this guy. And so every day that I work at the Suns, I try to be Jeff Fisher to somebody else. And when you feel the compassion in your soul, that's when you know how to become a leader. And the people who work for you will feel, when they feel that love and that compassion coming from you, that's when they're going to understand what addictive leadership is. So anyway, with all that being said, I will turn the floor back over.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you all for coming today. I'm grateful for the chance to get to meet each one of you. I have a couple of pieces of homework. Please link up with me on LinkedIn. My last name is Theis, T-H-E-I-S, first name Doug. And second, think about the hard lesson that you've learned in your leadership journey so far, and think about what it is that's changed in your approach to leadership. You've got 2 great talks this morning. 1, working on yourself internally, and 2, working and helping your team. Take this home and make a difference, and we'll see you on February 25th. Thank you.